Having worked in the nonprofit sector for a number of years, I'm always really brought in by people who have pursued a vision, a passion in their life, something that maybe at the initial phase was just a desire to reach out and do something. And it's interesting how we all have been in this situation where we've been prepared our entire lives for what we're about to do. You're going to hear the first part of a story today from a couple who pursued just the very basics of a vision from their background and how that has continued to grow and how it is continuing to change lives. So put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it's time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. Welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. I'm Steve Glavin, and this is the show where we come together around our virtual coffee table each week and join the conversation to chat about interesting topics with amazing guests. If you're joining for the first time today, welcome. And if you've been with us before, welcome back. Well, see who's with us today. I see that Shalane is here. Rick is here. Yes, good morning, and everybody drink. That's absolutely right. We got to get started. Kathy Garlick is here. Good morning. If you have joined us live, on this Saturday, October 19th, 2024. That's when we're coming on the air live. And if you are with us, please say hello in the chat to let us know that you are here and that you're joining the conversation around our virtual coffee table. And once we get into our topic today, please do make sure that you are commenting and joining that conversation as well. I think you're going to find it very interesting and inspiring. Is the right word? I always get, this is one of those, I'm a stickler for certain things in grammar and English language. And there are some that it's like, what is the exact right term here? Do you say that something is inspiring or something is inspirational? What do you know about it? And if you've got one of the guides, like the AP guide to proper English or whatever, some of the other, what were the ones that we used in high school? Was it White's guide to English? There were just various guides that get used. And I know in professional, like writing articles and that type of thing, I think it's the Associated Press guide that's used. But anyway, what is the correct term? If you say, do you say that something is inspiring or something is inspirational? I pride myself on being pretty good with knowing what the right form of a word is supposed to be, but that one always throws me. So let me know if you can find out. Hi, Carla. And if you are, by the way, I mentioned if you're tuning in live, yes, say hello, join the conversation. If you are joining us later on, because we do record these episodes and they're available on both Facebook and YouTube after the fact, and you come in later on to watch this, you can also join the conversation and let us know that you were here and that you joined. I try to look on both Facebook and YouTube later on, and you can kind of see numbers, you can do the analytics, but it's not always easy to figure out exactly who and how much that they watched. Girls Soccer Worldwide is on here, which I assume, I should never assume, but I think means that our guests, Walter and Pamela, are tuning in and they're going to be able to be part of the conversation. I always think that's cool. Hi, Jerry. And all right, Girls Soccer Worldwide is in the house, right? Carissa, our director, Carissa, has made the call out. Yeah, and it's interesting as we're now midway, a little past midway into October, we're really starting to show definite signs of the autumn season, and we're starting to approach what I refer to as kind of the holiday snowball. Not that it's snowing yet, thank goodness. We're not quite ready for that. But we get into this thing where some people, not everybody celebrates Halloween, but there is a ramp up to Halloween. You see it in the stores, the decor, the candy, the costumes, and it's kind of that snowball into all the things that happen between October. It really, the last quarter of the year becomes more or less the lead into the holiday season. We get all the lead in, and even if you don't celebrate it, you're exposed to it, right? You can't help but see it. So you get Halloween, and there are other things that are happening during the fall that people are doing, but the kind of the formal ones, the calendared ones, are Halloween, and then you get to Thanksgiving in the United States. Canada already had their Thanksgiving. That was last week, I believe. And then you're getting into the December holiday season, which includes Christmas and Hanukkah and other holidays that are celebrated by different religions and different cultures. And it's just like from here going on the rest of the way through the year, just feels like, I say snowball because it feels like you're on a downhill roll and it just keeps going. But anyway, how are you doing with all of that ramp up? How are you doing with the preparations for and the celebrations of all the things that take place? And what are the things that you like to participate in when you are into this season? What does your family do, or what do you get ready for in the process? I remember back in the day, we used to, especially when I was in the workplace, a lot of the places where I worked, there would be opportunities around Halloween, whether they called it Halloween or not. There would be an opportunity to actually dress up, come to work dressed up. I remember one place that I worked many years ago in the Portland area. They would we worked in a building, actually a series of 3 buildings that were all just within a block of each other. And typically every year in the lobby of one of the buildings, somebody would sponsor a contest where anybody who was in costume from any of the companies in any of those buildings come together. There would oftentimes be well over 100 people parading through the lobby of this office, and there were prizes handed. I've got other stories about some of the bizarre things that I did around costuming and stuff back in the day. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime. But again, if you have just joined us, please do say hello in the chat. I think I said hi to Jerry Thompson. Hi, Jerry. Jerry, I appreciate so much people like Jerry and so many of you who come in on a consistent basis. I've mentioned this before. Jerry and I go back all the way to elementary school at Kennedy Grade School in Portland is where we met and were classmates. And so it's fun to be connected, to stay connected. One of the things I love about Facebook is how we do stay connected with people. So it's always fun to see Jerry on here, as well as, other people who I've known for a number of years. You know who you are. Anyway, hey, I want to talk a little bit about our sweet and savory this week. And I've got an interesting story that I want to share with you. And family members who are on here are already aware of this, but I have my cousins. So we all have the cousins on all sides of the family. My dad's family is originally from Croatia. We've talked about this before, but my dad was born in Zagreb, as was his younger sister, Mira. And they were the only kids, just the brother and sister, and then, of course, their parents, my grandparents. And they were a Jewish family that during World War II, at the beginning of the war, when things were getting very tense would be an understatement. Their lives were at risk. And they fled Croatia and they ended up in Italy. And we have gathered many of the stories over the years, but some years ago, 20 or so years ago, my Aunt Mira took the time to dictate out and record her recollections and her story. And at the time, she talked to my dad to kind of get his recollections and confirm some things. And she put this together in a notebook form that was given to every member of the family, her own kids, plus all of the cousins, myself and my siblings. And it's been a great source of our being able to go back and look at some things and confirm things that we also had gathered from conversations with my grandmother back in the day when she was alive, and things that we heard from my dad, and even were able to record his recollections at times. Well, as some of you know, back in the early part of this year, my siblings and I had the opportunity to go to Croatia and to Italy. And in Croatia particularly, we were able to spend time in Zagreb, where the family is from. We're able to see where the building that my dad and my Aunt Mira grew up in, up until the age when they had to leave Croatia. The building is still there. We were able to go to that building and visit some other sites that were relevant to their growing up. Well, some of my cousins had the opportunity, most of them for the very first time, to travel just this last month to Italy and Croatia. And they, in Italy particularly, had even more opportunity to visit some of the places that were very specific to where the family was, based on the information that was written down. I know I'm giving a long intro to this. There's more to it. But they have shared with us some of the experiences they had. And I'm going to share just a little bit with you, not because all of you are interested in my family, but because I think the story itself is just fascinating. So the cousins who went, my cousins Kay and Brenda, and then two of Brenda's daughters, Ria and Lydia, and a couple of the nieces, Rachel and Nicole. So they had this group of 6 women who went and took this trip. And ahead of time, Rachel, who did most of the planning for this, had gotten in touch with a tour company and a specific tour guide who met them in the Abruzzo region of Italy, which is where the family, our family, had ended up, in places like Pratte and Rapino. And they got to Rapino, and their tour guide had done research. They had sent him a copy of Aunt Mira's book. And so he was able to do research in the area. And actually, when they got there, he was able to connect them with some people who had it. By the way, this picture that you're seeing now is not from Italy. This is actually the group standing across the street from the building in Zagreb where my dad and their mom, the mom, grandmother, my Aunt Mira, grew up. And we had the opportunity when we were there earlier this year, my siblings and myself, to visit this building too. And we have pictures taken in the same spot. But this is them in Zagreb. But I want to talk a little bit about their time in Italy, because they had the opportunity not only to see some of the sites that were very relevant to our family, they actually got to visit with a descendant of the family that my grandparents, my dad and my aunt stayed with. They were actually able to go to that house, and they were actually able to meet the grandson. And they actually met another woman whose family was from that area, and she has since moved to Canada, but she comes back once a year. And it just happened that her visit coincided, and they were able to meet her. And it turned out that she is also writing the story. She has gathered information from her family. And I'm just going to read you a couple of things that our cousin Brenda just related to us. She said, we were first taken to the city hall, this is in Rapino, where we were met by the vice mayor of Rapino, a photographer who followed us around Rapino, the grandson of Mr. Bozelli, who was the family that my dad and aunt and grandparents stayed with, and his cousin, and a woman named Angela Fratte. Said that Angela is probably in her 70s, and her family left Rapino for Ottawa, Canada when she was 7 years old. She returns to Rapino every year for a couple of months, and it just happened that her time coincided with our trip. Several years ago, Angela spent a great deal of time gathering information and stories from her mother about what happened during World War II in Rapino. She is a writer and wanted to give the story to her son. Marino sent Mom's story to Angela, and Angela found that our family was a part of her story too. And it goes on to talk about the fact that in Angela's story, there are references specifically to my grandfather and to the Yugoslavs. And remember, Croatia was, back in those days, Yugoslavian or Yugoslavia. And she refers to our family that her mother met during that time. They also, and again, were able to visit the Bozelli home, which is the house where my family stayed. And they also went to Pratte, which is out in the mountains in that same region of Italy. And there's also stories within my family's history that part of the time, as they were escaping the Nazis, hid in caves in these mountains. Now, there are a number of caves there, and my cousins were actually able to visit, were taken to one of the caves to get a sense of it. No one knows for absolute certain, but it's very possible that this could be the very cave that our family lived in for a period of time. So I've been kind of long-winded in describing this. What I do want to do at this point is show you a very, very brief video that my cousins had created and posted online, or it's possible the tour company did this because the tour company was also very interested. This is a very brief video. You'll just get a bit of an overview of them touring in Rapino and then visiting the mountain area and the cave. Again, very brief video, and thank you for allowing me to ramble on a bit about that. As I said before, I recognize not everybody out there is going to be fascinated by our family story, but I think the emphasis here is so much of history is tied so often to our personal history. We don't always know it. And I find it fascinating when you make connections with the stories that you've heard or things that occurred in history generally, and they become very personal. There's a lot more to the story and the visit that my cousins got to make to both Italy and Croatia. And I so appreciate that they've been sharing it with us. But thank you for allowing me to share that. I hope you found at least part of that story interesting and didn't feel like I was just rambling on. We had one birthday that I was aware of this week that I wanted to wish. Rick Castaneda, filmmaker who is a friend of Coffee Breaks with Steve, has been on this show before. And Rick's birthday is coming up this next week on October 23rd. So a happy birthday to Rick. And if you have a special day this week that we didn't know about, we didn't have on our calendar, or I just simply forgot, but you'd like to make sure that we celebrate and acknowledge with you, please put it in the chat so we can make sure that we do recognize your special day. Maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's an anniversary, maybe it's another special day that you or a member of your family are celebrating you'd like to have us acknowledge with you. And if you got one coming up sometime in the remainder of October, or maybe sometime during this snowballed holiday season between now and the end of the year that you want to make sure we do get on our calendar, you can send us an email at cbwsteve@comcast.net. You see it there on your screen. Let us know about your special day. We'll make sure that we get it on the calendar and that we include it in the appropriate week when the time comes. All right. Listen, I want to tell you a little bit about our special guests today. And this is a couple who I've known for several years now. I was introduced to them when I was still in California. They had founded a nonprofit that was operating out of the same area. And we had an opportunity to meet several times, and I had the opportunity to get to know them and their organization. So I want to tell you a little bit about them, and then you're going to get to hear the first part of the story. There was actually enough to the story that we're splitting it up over 2 weeks. So you're going to hear part one today, and you're going to hear part two next week. Let me tell you a little bit about them before we get started here. Walter Pratte can be described in 3 words: steadfast, composed, and vigilant. He thrives for excellence and truly leads by example. Born and raised in Argentina, Walter played soccer his entire life, and in his early 20s explored a semi-pro career in Paraguay, which led to the vision behind girls soccer worldwide. He has been a professional women's soccer coach for more than 25 years and enjoys sharing his love and culture behind the game. He believes in the transformation the sport offers to our youth and how it directly shapes who they become on and off the field. Walter's vision for equality in the sport was the spark that led to girls soccer worldwide's beginnings, and he believes in the global impact that will be made when girls have access to sports and proper education. Pamela Jacobsen is a resilient and genuine leader who has the ability to show compassion while never losing sight of the goal. She has a myriad of leadership experience that led to her living in 4 states over a span of 18 years: Utah, where she was born and raised, New York, Colorado, and California, with a professional background that includes driving sales and strategy, talent recruitment and development, and staff training. In 2013, Pamela started her own photography business, and because of her passion for storytelling, she got on a plane to Paraguay to document Girls Soccer Worldwide's first trip. This led to a new path in life, and in 2019, she stepped away from her photography business to lead the organization's efforts. Yeah, there's a lot there. So now, please enjoy the first part of our conversation with Walter and Pamela. Well, Pamela and Walter, welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. We're excited to chat.
You know, I think it's always good to begin by letting people know kind of who you are and where you come from. So talk a little bit, each of you, about where you're from originally, what you do and have done professionally, and that will help us understand what we're going to be talking about today.
A little bit. Do you want to go, Walter, or do you want me to?
Ladies first.
All right. So I'm originally from Utah, and I've lived in a few different states. I lived on the East Coast in New York. I also lived in Denver, Colorado, and currently living in the Bay Area for the past almost 18 years. And the reason why I've lived in all those states is I worked for a company called MAC Cosmetics, and through growth of getting promoted, I had the opportunity to live in, I always say from, coast to coast, and to learn and grow in these positions that I was able to, step into. So I've held various management positions. I've held various leadership positions, and I do differentiate because management is leadership, but I was actually in one time in my career the senior trainer, and I was responsible for all of the training for our current staff in the entire Northwest region. So over 1,000 employees that I got to oversee how they got trained to give, the best customer service possible at the storefront. I also held field management positions. So at one point in my career, I was the MRO, what we called at that point, the MRO for the East Bay, oversaw $19 million worth of business, was responsible for the good times and the not so good times when, you're struggling in retail. And, just through my journey of managing multiple stores. But prior to that, I always had a passion for leadership. If you go back to who I was as a teen, and this leads into a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, I was always in some type of leadership role. However, I can have a spicy personality. So I wasn't always, I think, my best version of myself in those leadership roles. So, I got to move the ship and I got to do a lot of decision making. But when I look back, I don't really believe that I was the most impactful that I could be. And so fast forward all these years into what we're doing today in creating a leadership program, I have this really strong passion to be the voice that I didn't have. And, leadership programs didn't exist in the way that we're doing it back then. And, it's really giving these guys ladies, I think by default, we always say guys, but these ladies, an experience to look at themselves from a different perspective and to know their self-worth and value on a different level. And you can't make change or create change in someone else if you don't know truly who you are in the inside and where your identity lies. So, it's a little bit of myself in a nutshell.
Walter, what about you?
Well, originally from Argentina. I grew up in Buenos Aires. I get my studies there. I went to the service for almost 2 years. I was in the Army. Then life brought me to play semi-pro soccer in Paraguay, which we talk a little bit later on. This is why Paraguay is so important for me. My dad is from Paraguay. My mom is from Argentina, but I was born in Buenos Aires. 32 years ago, I moved to the U.S. Life brought me this way. I became a U.S. citizen in 2000. I want to have the opportunity to use my voice in both. And also, I've been in management, working in retail areas. I've been coaching for 30 years, something that I'm very passionate about. I have a professional license. I touch the life of thousands of kids and families, and able to help many girls to go through college through different scholarship programs that they were looking for, coaching at the highest level and travel all over the United States. And passionate about helping youth, trying to help them to make a difference in their life through the experience that I had coming in from another country and the life that I had of minimal things and being in this country, which is so great to be here and the opportunity this country give you, that I wanted to make sure that the girls and boys be able to fulfill their dreams and help them to, through a sport of soccer, to live a better life. And yeah.
So Girls Soccer Worldwide is the name of the organization that the two of you founded, and curious about how that came to be, what prompted starting it, how it came about, and what is the mission of the organization?
Well, I can start with that. I think I can give the top level, point of view of how it started, but I think that will also kind of lend into why Paraguay is so important to us. So, which is, Walter's connection. So, we got on a plane in 2016 just to the simplicity of creating an equal playing field for girls who didn't have access, because it's a machismo sport. If in many places around the world, especially in the Latin community, is machismo. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people here that live in the U.S. that have been raised around the sport in this equal, play system. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what it looks like elsewhere. And Walter played semi-pro in 1990, 91. Yes. Do the numbers. And he played in this community that living in extreme poverty. And, through this experience that he had, they gave him so much, but had so little. And he made a promise to come back and give back if he was ever to make his way for himself. And of course, his plans was to go pro, but God had other plans. And in the meantime, he went back to Argentina, made his way out here, and through coaching female soccer, he saw what the sport gave them. And it was really about looking back and imagining, what if my sisters had access to the sport? What would it have done with him if you look at the life skills and the experiences that it brings, and how it shapes and molds who you become as a person, because there are life skills that you get in team sports that you will not get in a classroom. And that's just facts, right? So he had this vision and had this nudge in 2015 to go back to Pratte, because he made that promise. And I'll let you take it from here, because that's where the rest of it unfolds. And you can probably even kind of tap into a little bit of what I just shared. But
yeah, totally. Yeah. The biggest thing, Steve, was for me as coming in from another country, and coming in from poverty as well. We always say this is the land of opportunities, right? This is a beautiful country. For me, coaching kids and be able to see them sometimes that they leave the soccer balls in the field. They leave their jackets in the field. They leave all kinds of things. I was like always thinking about, I will never be able to buy again if that happened to me back home, So I wanted to, in a way, give him an idea of what's going on around the world. But the other two things that struck me a lot, I coached in Colorado for 15 years. I've been in the Bay Area for another 17. Was the level of mental issues and a sense of depression, stress, addictions at a younger age. Trying to understand from you why our youth are going through that, right? What are we missing? And because back home we don't have anything, we're just dying for opportunities. And the kids that I see over here, I mean, like, they have everything, but over there we have a different type of poverty, which is the essential things that we're looking for example, material or economics or food. Over here we have a different type of poverty. We have everything, but we don't have sometimes the purpose in life. So the idea, I said to Penn, imagine if I bring those girls that I'm coaching and I bring them to South America, and they can see how other people live in South America with so little, how they will change your life. And I was like, I think it will help them tremendously. I don't want them to feel sorry, or bad for what they have. I just want them to feel empowered for what they have and create change, not only in other people's life, but more important in their life. Say, hey, I had this opportunity. I had this responsibility that I need to do better and do more in life for others and for myself especially. And that's how it started. We just shared with some families. I said to Pam, we need to do this. And she's like, you're crazy. Why are you crazy? Why do you want to go to South America with kids? You know how dangerous it is? I said, I know. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're gonna make it work. And 9 families they called me and said, we want to talk about your dream. And because the kids are talking about it. So I invited Pen to come over, and she thought I was crazy, but she came anyway. And she was going to document everything. And we made the trip. And I know where I was going. I don't know how I was going to do it, but I know where I was going. And it worked out. And we went to Paraguay. We went to Argentina first from them. Then we went to Paraguay. We brought tennis shoes, soccer balls, used uniforms. And the girls show up. And the reason we choose Paraguay, like Pam said before, I make a promise that one day I was going to come back and help in such a low-income family. But like everything else in South America, soccer is the church of people. They're going to go every Sunday. And if you play soccer, you are their hero. And, I knew that I was in a poor area, but I have everything I need because I was playing soccer. And they give me what they don't have when I left. They threw a party for me, my birthday. They were giving presents like onions and, yuccas and stuff like that is from the earth. And just because that's what they have, and it was important for them. So for me, it was very special. My father was from there. I've never been there before, but my father was from there. My grandma lived there. My godfather lived there. So I have roots in the area. And when I see the way they were living, I was like, I have to make an impact. I have to make a difference. If a God brought me to the U.S. and give me this opportunity, I had to do something with that. I cannot preach to the kids to do something so they can make a difference in me just being here. So we did it. We traveled. It was amazing. We have almost 40 girls the first time that we did the training, even though my friend was saying to them, well, the first time I talked to them, hey, I want to create like an opportunity for kids to play soccer. And he said to me, oh, the boys will love it. And I said, no, but I want to create an opportunity for the girls. I mean, I've been coaching girls for more than 20 years. So the girls don't want to play, don't worry. And so when we did the training, like 40 girls show up. And they were nervous for sure. But they show up and it was amazing after that.
You've talked already about the fact that these are underserved areas, that soccer tends to be more of a sort of a machismo type of sport in many cultures. And one of the thoughts that can come to mind is, great, you went down there and did that, and you saw girls show up. I'm curious about how that impacted the community, the village, how that continued after you left even that first time, and talk a little bit about even returning and how this has continued to grow.
You want to? He's looking at me. Yeah, I can take that. So that's a great question, Steve, too, because we're told that girls didn't want to play. Obviously, we knew that was not the truth. Walter knew that was just a perceived belief that they've been conditioned to believe, right? And we always say that girls are girls regardless of where they're born. The only difference is where they're born and the socioeconomic status that they're born into. So we knew girls wanted to play, especially if they're growing up in a culture that they eat, breathe, sleep soccer. Why wouldn't they want to play? And fast forward, I'm going to kind of answer your question in a twofold. Fast forward, meeting girls that are now adults, they would say to us that they never shared the fact that they loved the game and wanted to play because they were filled with shame to even admit that they wanted to be a soccer player. So they just put it on a shelf, which is a part of who they are, and just pretended it didn't exist, right? So after that first trip, there was an interesting experience that took place, is that, we got these 40 girls and the number kept growing. Every workshop that we held, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And even as I'm telling you this, I'm visualizing the picture that we took. And it was just this massive group of girls that came that were finally be given an opportunity to play the game that they so much well deserve, as the boy standing next to them. And in one of these workshops, Walter was talking about the fact of, put your shoulders back, be proud that you're here, have confidence, like this space is yours. So what ended up happening is, after Walter was encouraging them to stand on those 2 feet and be proud that you have the opportunity to stand here, like we're opening the door for you. All of a sudden he sees these shoulders go down, he sees these heads go down, and he kept saying, like, come on, like this space is for you. He realizes there's boys that are sitting in the stadium hackling, saying things, but in their indigenous language. And Walter put a quick stop to that and, stopped the workshop, walked right over to the stand. And do you want to share what you shared? Or
go ahead. Right.
I love this story. I love it because he basically walked over there in front of the community and said, if you cannot stand here and give these girls the respect they deserve to play this game, you need to pick up your bags and you need to leave. He pointed at the door, leave. And it went completely silent. And I think that was one of the first times, I'm not going to say it, I don't know, I haven't been there, but it was probably one of the very first times that they've had somebody stand up and be that voice for them, especially a male. Right? It was the men that were telling them that they shouldn't be playing because a girl has a certain place in a home, right? You are expected to do certain things and you do not play the sport because, one, it's dirty, and there's a lot of social stigmas that come with the fact of even just wanting to be a player. And no girl wants to grow up with those stigmas, whether you believe them or not, right? So when you have this guy that's got this voice telling them to leave, the crowd goes silent. And what happened next, the moms in the stadium started cheering, they started clapping, and that was confirmation for us that we're doing something right. And then from there on out, these girls were like, yes, this is my space, I'm going to play. And it was just this beautiful experience from there on out. And it just changed the trajectory of what was to come. And from there, we kept coming back. We came back the next year, and what we saw happening was lives were changing, not only for the girls that were now being given this opportunity to step into something that they've wanted and to believe that they deserve to be on the field, but the girls that traveled, those 9 girls, came back with a different lens, right? The issues or the challenges that they thought they had were no longer challenges. They looked at it from a place of, maybe I shouldn't be putting my focus there, and I'm going to redirect. And the trajectory of their future changed. So I will say, going back to, Walter made the comment that I thought he was crazy. I thought he was absolutely crazy, and I did not support this idea. And one thing that I didn't mention is when I was 24, 25, living in New York, I fell in love with the camera. I fell in love and knew that this gift that I was given was to give back. And if anybody knew me at that point, they would have known that this was something that I believed God gave me, and I was supposed to use it for something bigger. I'm a big believer that, the gifts that we're given are not just for ourselves. They're meant to be shared, but they're always for a bigger purpose. And I always said I was going to document third world countries to educate and pop the bubble that we live in. I knew I was supposed to be on that trip. I knew that I was solely going to go to document this experience, and told him, okay, if you're going to do this and you really believe in this wholeheartedly, I'm going to document it so you have the stories, not connecting back to this knowing that I had, decades earlier. I stood in that room with these 9 families, and I knew wholeheartedly I was exactly where I needed to be. I got on that plane, I documented it, had no other plans to be a part of this work, this mission. And what I saw personally, and I say I because Walter was already exposed to all this. He grew up in poverty. He knew he didn't have the cultural shock that we all had getting on that plane. And what I was exposed to, what I was introduced to, shook me at the core. And I got back on that plane, and I remember us both looking at each other, and I said, I can't come home and not do anything about this. I'm still me, but there's a whole nother path I'm supposed to be stepping into. And that's when we came home and started the paperwork to start the nonprofit. Had no clue what we were doing at that point. Our mission was just to create an equal playing field. But what happened, that was a little Southern draw. I don't know where that came from. I've never lived in the South. What had happened was we got on the plane 2017, same idea in mind. We did it again for another year. And what we started to learn is that we can keep these girls on the soccer field. We can create these opportunities. But what's happening that we were not so much aware of is when these girls turn 14, 15 years old, it's not uncommon for them to be pulled out of school. Because if you're a family faced with extreme poverty and you have a choice to put food on your table or keep your child, a lot of times your daughter, in school, you're going to choose food because you're in survival mode. It's all about what you need to do to meet the essential needs of your family at that given time. And so education is being lost, and the dreams of these girls are going, to the wayside because of it. And we realize there's a stronger connection where we need to make sure that sports and education are aligned, because the soccer field only does one thing, but if these girls aren't kept in school, their future, that possibility of having a stronger future and ever getting out of poverty is never going to happen. So we started a scholarship program, and our mission was to keep these girls in school. So not only were we focusing on soccer, but now we were introducing this concept of, we're going to take the financial burden off of your family, so your family has no reason or excuse to take you out of school, and we're going to see you for the long haul. And that is where our mission statement started to evolve into something bigger, which is to empower girls to rise up out of poverty through sports education and leadership opportunities. And there's layered effects that have grown on top of that, which we will dive into. But yeah.
So there you have the first part, and you can begin to see there's just so much of this story that is so amazing. You can see why we wanted to break this up over a couple of weeks. So you will get to hear more of Walter and Pamela's story, and how Girls Soccer Worldwide, Pamela mentioned there at the end, some of the things that they began to look at in expanding the mission and expanding this as it grew, as it evolved naturally in terms of providing the scholarship opportunities. You're going to hear a lot more next week. You'll want to tune in next week, because there's a lot more to what has developed over the last several years with this, both in Paraguay and back home. It's become something that, as so often happens with these missions and with these passions, in many ways it's taken on a life of its own, and in directions and including elements that obviously Walter and Pamela never anticipated from the beginning, when Walter just said, I want to go to Paraguay and I want to empower these girls and let them know that soccer is an avenue for them as well. You can see how this story is important, and to me, it's a tremendous privilege to be able to bring this story and so many stories like this to you. So once again, thank you to Walter and Pamela for taking the time. We had quite a lengthy conversation, and most of it is not edited out. The only things that get edited, oftentimes, just some backstory about how we do these programs. Oftentimes, we have to edit out quite a bit just for time, and sometimes it's for content. And I always tell my guests, if at all possible, the part that's going to get edited out is me rambling on, as you hear me doing oftentimes live. But there was just so much meat, so much substance to this story that I did not want to leave anything out. So once again, thank you, Walter and Pamela, for sharing so much of this story. And you do want to be here next week, I guarantee you. I want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up next week and in the next couple of weeks after that on Coffee Breaks with Steve. First of all, yes, next week we're going to be back with Walter and Pamela, and you're going to hear the rest of the story. Although I don't think it's the rest of the story. I think it's just the next chapters of the story, because this is continuing to grow and continuing to be a very substantive opportunity. And by the way, I did put in the chat the website for Girls Soccer Worldwide. Very easy to find. If you go online, if you don't, I mean, it's https or www.girlsoccerworldwide, one word, .org, but you could do a Google search and you would find it as well. If you want to find out more about their organization, what they're doing, even get some spoilers about things we're going to talk about next week, and find out how you can support this organization, you can go to their website. So we will continue that conversation. And then in 2 weeks, on November 2nd, we're going to be back in England. We've been over the pond several times in the last few weeks, having conversations with some of our friends over there. And on November 2nd, we have a conversation with Stacy and Kyle Vandola Evans, who are professional. You ready for this? They are professional jousters, not exhibition jousters, competitive jousters, who also organize and marshal, which means oversee professional competitive jousting tournaments all over the world. And if you were not aware that jousting that was developed in medieval times is still a thing competitively, and that people engage in this sport, you're going to want to be here and hear their story, because it is also extraordinarily fascinating. And then after that, following week on November 9th, Melanie Sadek is going to be here. She's the executive director of an animal shelter in California that has grown from being very grassroots to now being a premier shelter and adoption center, and even veterinary clinic for animals, domestic animals. And you're going to hear from Melanie so many things about the importance of shelters like hers, and the work that goes beyond just what happens in the shelter to try to educate and to try to provide opportunities for people to find new family members and understand some of the challenges that face this type of work. So you'll want to be here to hear Melanie's story as well. What are the topics that you would like to discuss and you would like to see us have as part of the conversation on Coffee Breaks? You have ideas. You have shared them with me, and I appreciate that. Who are the guests that you want to see on the show? Well, you can email at cbwsteve@comcast.net. There is the email address. You know it, showing there on the screen, but email us with your ideas. And if you want to have a further conversation, maybe it's somebody you know that you think would be a great guest, and we can talk about that. More than happy to do that. And then just a reminder, please, 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 we want to grow the YouTube side of what we're doing. These conversations happen most effectively here when we're live. When we're live, this chat is where we can engage around our virtual coffee table. But there's so many people out there, and we've heard from them, who come in and tune in later on. Some of them don't find us on Facebook, but they're doing searches on YouTube. And when we get more subscribers to our YouTube channel and more people watching and liking the videos, on YouTube's algorithm, it raises our visibility, and it means that even more people are going to hear stories like Walter's and Pamela's. They're going to be introduced to our topics and our guests. And we always want to keep the intimacy and this conversation here on Facebook. It's fun when there's just this core group here. But we want the messages and the topics and the guests to get out to more people. So if you are already a subscriber, that's great. If you are not yet a subscriber to our YouTube channel, you can find it just by doing an easy search for Coffee Breaks with Steve on YouTube, or the link is now in the chat that you can go there after the show and be a subscriber. But also, whether or not you're a subscriber, especially if you're already a subscriber, would you share the channel with other people, please? I'm not looking for fame and fortune for myself, but we would love for these stories to get out in front of even more people. And when you share that information and you give your own endorsement and say this is a worthwhile place to come and watch. We've heard from people who just came across it casually, who've reached out to us and said that a particular story, a particular guest, a particular topic was something that inspired them and motivated them. And so we want to get that out to even more people so that these stories and the opportunity for even more people to support organizations like Girls Soccer Worldwide, that gets out in front of more people. So I've made my pitch. I thank you for that. I thank you for being part of this conversation. Thank you. And once again, a big thank you to Walter and Pamela, and we'll be back with them next week. But I want to thank you as well for taking the time to join us around our virtual coffee table, for being part of the conversation, for sharing your own passions. And, you know, we all have those passions. We all have things that inspire us. I keep using that word inspire. I guess I'm finding where inspired and inspirational come in. Anyway, we all have those things in life that do inspire us, that motivate us, that we are passionate about. We all have opportunities to reach out with that in mind. So please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Coffee Breaks with Steve.